Well, Max got the pole yesterday, a much acclaimed pole, but it didn't do much good in the race. It only lasted for a couple of 100 meters before turn one, and by then it was all over. The race belonged to Oscar Piastri. And at this point, I do feel like reminding everyone that I've been banging on for I don't know how long about how the pole sitter, the pole winner, should, on the Saturday night, when he gets the pole, Saturday afternoon, be allowed then to choose which side of the grid from which he wants to start. And I say that because there are certain circuits on the calendar where you're almost better off to be qualifying second. This may well have been one of them. Another one that springs to mind is Austin. And I think Brazil is another circuit where if you are on the inside, it's a very short run, just like Austin and just like Jeddah. If you're on the inside, you only have to make a mediocre start, basically to have the inside running going into the first corner and to control things. As it was, Oscar Piastri made an excellent start from the inside. Max is on the outside, admittedly on the clean side. But already Oscar was alongside him even before they got to the braking area. And there was no way in the world that that wasn't going to be Oscar Piastri's corner. And Max in that situation is always going to do what Max does. He's going to fight to the bitter end. And of course, he ran wide, went over the runoff area and took the lead into the first lap. But it didn't do him any good because he then got a 5-second penalty for that. Max's argument over the radio to the team was there was no way Oscar was going to make that corner at that speed. He forced me off. But of course, Max was on the outside. And on this occasion, although a lot of the new sporting regs do favour the driver on the outside, on this occasion, it was clearly Oscar who was going to get the advantage. He was either going to be given the position back or there was going to be a penalty for Max. And so it proved. Max got that 5-second penalty and he drove beautifully and he finished 2.5 seconds behind Oscar at the end. But it was Oscar Piastri's race. He was absolutely superb in the McLaren. Everything that he looked as if he would be in the build-up to this race on Friday and Saturday. Had a couple of lurid moments, quick moments over the curbs on fast corners, possibly damaged the floor a little bit. And towards the end of the race, and it didn't just affect Oscar, it affected a lot of people, there was an unbelievable drama getting past the slower back markers, the guys who were being lapped. I was under the impression in Formula One these days that you can hold up a leader or somebody who's a lap ahead of you for maybe a corner or maybe two, but not for a lap and a half, which is what guys like Bortoleto and Stroll were doing when Oscar and Max were coming past. And it kind of ruined the back end of the race. I think it literally took Max 2 laps to get past Stroll, which was ridiculous. As it was, Max never got within DRS range of Oscar. By the time he came out of his pit stop, which was obviously elongated by 5 seconds, he was about 4.5 seconds behind Oscar. And although typically, systematically, he was usually 0.2, maybe 0.3 in Sector 1, quicker than Oscar. Sector 2, usually Oscar was slightly quicker. Sector 3, they were about on a par. So there was no way in the world that Max was going to be able to do anything about Oscar Piastri unless he made a mistake, which he didn't, and he controlled the race beautifully. I think Oscar's only real drama was that he was starting to catch Lando Norris, who had started on hard tyres. Everybody else is on medium from his P10 position, obviously to get track position. He did really well, Lando, and did exactly that. But of course, with these hard tyres going off, it wasn't that difficult for Oscar to be catching him. And then he was running in dirty air for 4 or 5 laps before Lando eventually came in to switch to mediums. And then he was okay. Then it was plain sailing. That was about the only thing. There was quite a big effect of following other cars in terms of deterioration of the tyres in this Grand Prix. So it was Oscar Piastri, absolutely superb, who won this race. Another big step forward for him within the McLaren team in terms of where they're going with the championship. It's brewing up to be one of those seasons where it's going to be Piastri, Norris, Piastri. And I guess that's what McLaren asked for. It's what McLaren want. And it'll be interesting to see how it pans out as the season progresses. At the moment, there's no sign that they have any sort of game plan at all. And from Oscar Piastri's point of view, there is no way in the world he will now be thinking of, oh yeah, well, Lando's the number one driver or whatever they may want to think. I better give him some help to get him back into the lead of the championship, because Oscar Piastri could very, very easily now become world champion in 2025. Max P2, I think, was resigned by the end of the race, with that 5-second penalty served. There were some very good things to come out of this weekend. He got the pole, he finished second, not far away from McLaren's pace. I thought actually Red Bull would be in more trouble when it came to the last third of both stints on, first of all, the medium and then the hard tyre. But they weren't. The Red Bull was very good on tyres, even though he was relatively close to Oscar and in traffic quite a lot in the back half of the race. So that's a very good thing for Red Bull. They've done an excellent job on the development of that car, if that's the right word, over the last 2 weeks. So very good. And now they go back to Europe at the end of this triple header, obviously with more upgrades to come for that car. So it's not over yet by any means. And Red Bull and Max can go away thinking, yeah, P2, it would have been close had we not had that 5-second penalty. Indeed, if Max had given position straight back to Oscar as that accelerated out of turn 1, turn 2, it would be interesting to think about how that race would have gone. Assuming they hadn't had some sort of drama, collision or whatever, I think Oscar would still have done it. I think he had the better car, but having said that, he's slightly more prone to mistakes than Max, so it would have been very, very close. P3, an excellent Charles Leclerc. How many times have we been saying that? I mean, talk about over-delivering again, given the performance of the Ferrari. A brilliant drive by Charles Leclerc. Lando Norris catching him very, very fast in the closing stages of the race, but Charles, no mistakes on tyres that were going away, and finished third for Ferrari. I mean, if Ferrari's barometer was the 7 times world champion Lewis Hamilton, if that was the barometer of how well the car is going, they'd be in massive depression by now, because Lewis was beaten soundly, not only by George Russell, who finished 5th behind Lando, but also by Kimi Antonelli, who finished 6th in the other Mercedes. Lewis beaten by his young replacement at Mercedes. And to drone round in 7th place, as he did, was very, very disappointing for Ferrari, for the fans, I guess, and certainly for Lewis, because it's one thing to finish the race with maybe no balance, no grip, whatever it was going to be. But for Charles Leclerc to drive the blinder that he did in the same car, again, just underlines the issues that are going on now with Lewis at Ferrari. Just going back to Lando, he definitely had the face on, the eyes on before he got into the car in the race today to make up for what happened yesterday. And he drove well, he made a good start. Most of his passes were very clean. But and then after his pit stop, yet another typical Lando brainstorm. He kind of played with fire with the white lines coming out of the pit lane exit. And you wonder why he would keep doing things like that. I mean, there was the jump start. It wasn't really the jump start. It was the anticipated start from which he then had to brake that he got the penalty for in Bahrain. And now almost a similar silly thing in Saudi Arabia. And it is a bit of a trademark of Lando Norris. As I said recently, he has these sort of brainstorms where things just don't go as they should. You don't see Oscar Piastri doing that sort of thing. And Oscar very laid back in victory, just thanking the guys. Nothing, no screaming, no over the top stuff, just very, very cool. Very, very impressive to see how he operates now as he's getting more mature and he's getting these wins under his belt. And he can sniff, of course, that he is potentially going to be able to win a championship. The Williams-Mercedes drivers did a very good job today. Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon finished 8th and 9th. And Isack Hadjar, again impressing in the Racing Bulls to finish 10th after a relatively quiet build-up to the Grand Prix in practice and qualifying. Another very good race drive by Isack Hadjar. And Fernando Alonso was 11th for Aston Martin, which I guess he will say yet again, and I'm sure he's absolutely right, was the best that car could do. You really got to wonder what's going on there at the moment. But Fernando lucky to finish the race because I've got to say a reckless Gabriele Bortoleto just drove across straight into Fernando on the straight just before the braking area into turn 1. He was having a battle with Liam Lawson at the time, but had no idea that Fernando was there and just drove into him. It looked at that moment to me as if this particular rookie was completely out of his depth in terms of actually having a race wheel-to-wheel battle in a Formula One environment. And it was a very, very nasty move that we saw there. There was the predicted first lap shunt, this time between Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly. Shame both of them out. It was a racing incident. It was a typical thing of running side by side out of those chicanes and wheels getting interlocked. Not a fan of those chicanes, not a fan of that circuit overall, as you probably gathered. And it was quite a big shunt for Gasly, went in backwards into the wall. Yuki Tsunoda tried to continue, but it was no good. So those two were out, which is a shame. Both of them potential point scorers today. But inevitably on a circuit like this, you are going to have these first corner shunts, just as you're always going to have a drama between the two guys on the front row of the grid going into turn 1. It's not unusual. We've seen it before many times. We also had a replay to some extent of 2021. For a while, there was Max and Lewis Hamilton after Max's pit stop. Lewis running a longer stint and playing around with DRS going into turn 27, as they did in 2021. And there was similar DRS argy-bargy, not quite as sophisticated, I think, as the Max Lewis stuff when Lando got involved with Lewis as well, trying to pass him. Lewis knows how to use the DRS around Saudi Arabia, that's for sure. But it took Lando 3 or 4 laps eventually to get him and do the clean pass, which is obviously at the end of the pit straight, because then he's got sectors 1 and 2 to get away from Lewis. But as he was doing it before, he was doing it going into 27, and Lewis is just repassing him on the start-finish line. As I say, a few replays there of of 2021, but not real Grand Prix racing on a real Grand Prix circuit, in my opinion. It's sort of artificial DRS. Let's have some fun type stuff. In the meantime, let's have another listen to the thoughts and words of Steve Hallam, who was Ayrton Senna's race engineer in 1986 on the Lotus 98T Renault. And it's from this car that some materials have made their way into the latest timepiece from REC watches.
He was probably the most sensitive individual I've ever experienced in the cockpit in terms of feeling the car. I want to use the word delicate, but that's not the right word. Sensitive is probably the best word. He would feel the car through every surface that his body came into contact with. That would be the soles of the feet, the palms of the hand, because they were stick shift, his sensitivity on the steering wheel, and the feeling through his body in terms of the seat. And on a number of occasions, he would say, once we understood what was happening for a certain characteristic that we were feeling, he would often say to me, "I'll remember that, so we'll know that for the future," or "I'll remember that feeling, and I won't forget that." And what I think we saw, which comes back to one of the early points that I made, during the course of the year, his experience and grew with the car at a very quick rate. And so by the time we were setting the car up at the end of the year, he knew where he needed to be, and we could get there pretty quickly if it wasn't there when we started. I would just say he taught us to ensure that we had done everything possible to make the driver comfortable in the car. There are some drivers that had a higher degree of tolerance to either discomfort or whatever, and he had a very high tolerance as well. But he would just keep reminding you, "We've got to do something about this. We've got to do something about this." And on race day morning, I personally would tape his right hand up to protect him on the gear lever, and occasionally we'd have to redo it if it wasn't done right. He was always conscious of never using either a pair of gloves or a helmet or shoes that he had never run before for an important drive such as qualifying or the race. He was just very. It's all common sense, but he was just at the forefront of ensuring that all happened.
And you can order your 98T RAC watch by following the link in the description below this video. Big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, to Track Ninja, and of course to RAC Watches for their support of this channel. Look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. Happy Easter.